I still remember the sound of her voice before I ever saw her face, calm, precise, and carrying that kind of warmth you don't expect from strangers. The first time I met her, the day had been unusually still. A faint hum of ceiling fans, the soft tapping of a pencil, and the scent of rain waiting just beyond the window, everything around us seemed to pause. She stood by the counter, flipping through a few papers, her fingers steady, her focus sharp. There was something about the way she carried silence, not empty, but alive. She looked up once, and our eyes met briefly. Just enough to make me forget what I'd come there for. She was older, not in the way people mean it when they talk about age, but in the way she seemed to know things before you said them. Her presence filled the small office like a quiet song, composed, careful, and just a little sad around the edges. When she smiled, it wasn't out of politeness. It was the kind of smile that seemed to acknowledge something unspoken in you. I was 22, barely sure of who I was, but certain that I'd never met anyone who made ordinary moments feel like confession. She asked a question, something simple about the form I was filling, and I forgot how to answer for a second too long. Her brow lifted slightly, amused, though she tried to hide it. "First day nerves?" she asked. "Something like that," I said, though that wasn't true. It wasn't the day that made me nervous. It was her voice, the calm rhythm of it, the way every word seemed to mean a little more than it should. We spent the next few minutes in polite conversation, small talk wrapped in silence. Every now and then, her hand would brush past mine as she pointed something out on the paper. It wasn't deliberate, I think. But every accidental touch left a quiet echo that lingered too long. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. The light flickered. She looked toward the window, her profile lit in the pale glow of late afternoon. "It always rains when you need to be somewhere," she said softly. "I don't mind," I replied. "It makes it easier to stay a little longer." That earned me another look, one that wasn't quite a smile, not quite surprise. For a heartbeat, the space between us felt charged with something neither of us had invited, but both had noticed. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, turned back to the papers, and said, "You'll get used to this place." Her tone was steady, but her hand trembled slightly as she passed me the final document. When our fingers touched again, neither of us pulled away right away. Just the briefest hesitation, long enough to mean something, short enough to pretend it didn't. The sound of the door opening broke the stillness. Someone else had entered, footsteps, voices, the world returning. She withdrew her hand first, her voice suddenly brisk again. "Welcome aboard," she said, the warmth hidden neatly behind professionalism. And just like that, the moment was gone. Or maybe it was only beginning. You learn a lot about someone from the way they avoid looking at you. Weeks passed, and the small office began to feel less like a building and more like a rhythm I couldn't escape. Every morning she was already there, the hum of her computer, the faint scent of her tea, the quiet steadiness that filled the room before anyone else arrived. I told myself the feeling would fade. It didn't. She never spoke much about her life beyond these walls, but the few details slipped out between tasks, fragments of an older world. A house too quiet now that her daughter had left for university. A husband she'd grown apart from years ago, though she never said the word divorced. She carried her solitude like perfume, invisible, constant, and somehow beautiful. Sometimes, when she leaned over my desk to point at a report or correct a line, her hand would rest lightly on the back of my chair. The touch was nothing, really, but it made the air different. My heart always stuttered at that distance, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin, far enough to pretend I didn't. She noticed, of course. Once she pulled her hand away too quickly, her voice tightening. "You'll get faster at this. You're still learning." It was a small correction, but it carried something unspoken, a reminder of the line neither of us had agreed on but both understood. I began catching myself watching her too often. The way she tilted her head while reading, how she pressed her lips together when something amused her, how the light found the strands of silver in her hair. And then, every time she looked up, I'd force myself to look busy, typing nonsense, flipping papers, anything to hide that I'd been memorizing her in silence. That day, the rain returned, same as before. Power flickered again, plunging the room into half-shadow. She sighed, rubbing her temples, and said quietly, "We might be here a while." Without meaning to, I laughed. "Guess the weather likes trapping us together." She smiled barely, that restrained kind that said she'd heard what I meant, not what I'd said. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Just the sound of rain, and her breath, calm and close enough that I could feel it brush my cheek as she leaned over to check the file between us. The world outside blurred into gray streaks against the window. Inside, it felt too bright, too quiet, too alive. Then a soft sound, her phone vibrating on the table. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening for just a second. A message, maybe? A name she didn't want to see. When she spoke again, her tone was steadier. "People talk," she murmured, almost to herself. "They always do. I don't care what they say," I replied before I could stop myself. She looked up sharply, eyes unreadable, searching. And for the first time, she didn't look away. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for the pen, a brief, fragile connection, either of us pretending it didn't happen this time. Just a moment, a heartbeat shared between two people who should have known better. And still, neither of us moved. It's strange how silence can feel louder when someone's standing too close. By now, we had learned the rhythm of pretending, careful glances, quiet tones, small talk that carried the weight of things unsaid. But some days, the pretending slipped. Today was one of them. It started with a mistake, mine. A report that needed her signature before the meeting, a deadline closing in, the storm outside turning the world to silver and shadow again. The power flickered twice before she sighed and gestured for me to sit beside her. "Let's finish this together," she said. Simple words, but they felt heavier than they should have. The room was too small for two people to share one desk comfortably. Our chairs brushed. My sleeve caught the edge of hers. The scent of her perfume, something light and clean, like jasmine and rain, filled every space between breaths. "Here," she said softly, leaning closer to point at the numbers. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled ever so slightly when it rested near mine. I wanted to focus on the page. I couldn't. When I turned to answer, our faces were close enough for my pulse to stumble. Her eyes flicked to my lips, then away, quick, guilty, human. We froze there, both of us knowing what that moment meant, both refusing to let it happen. A knock shattered the stillness. "Ma'am?" a voice called from the hallway. One of the staff. She jerked back instantly, nearly spilling her pen. "Just a minute," she said, too quickly, too loud. The footsteps lingered, then faded. She exhaled, eyes closing for a second. When she looked at me again, her expression was all composure, but the faint color in her cheeks betrayed her. "That can't happen," she whispered, though nothing had. "I know," I said, my voice low. "But it almost did." The rain drummed harder outside, steady and relentless. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. She looked toward the window, anywhere but at me. "You don't understand," she said finally. "You're young. People notice things. They twist them. I can't." Her voice broke there, not with tears, but with the effort of control. "I'm not a child," I said quietly. "And you're not doing anything wrong." She shook her head, half smiling at the impossibility of it. "Maybe not yet." The phone on her desk buzzed, a message lighting the screen, a name she didn't answer. I didn't ask. The glow faded, leaving us in dim quiet again. We went back to the paperwork, pretending to read, to focus, to breathe normally. But every movement felt too loud, every brush of paper, every shifting breath, every unspoken thought echoing in that fragile space between us. When the lights flickered once more, she startled slightly, and my hand moved on instinct, steadying hers. She didn't pull away this time. For a long heartbeat, we just stayed like that, her hand under mine, the sound of the rain, the scent of jasmine and fear and something dangerously close to longing. And when she finally looked up, eyes caught in mine, we both knew the truth neither of us dared to say: we were already too close. Some truths don't need to be spoken, they just hang between two people, heavy enough to pull the air out of the room. The week had been unbearable. She avoided eye contact. Meetings were shorter. Conversations strictly professional. But silence doesn't erase tension, it only sharpens it. That evening, the others had already left. Only the low hum of the air conditioner filled the room, steady as a heartbeat. I stayed behind to finish a report, or maybe I just couldn't make myself leave first. She stood by the window, the faint orange glow of the city casting her in half-light. The rain had stopped, but her reflection in the glass looked tired, distant, almost fragile. I didn't mean to speak, but the words came out anyway. "You've been avoiding me." Her shoulders stiffened. "You're imagining things." "No," I said quietly. "You won't even look at me anymore." She turned then, slowly, reluctantly, and the moment she did, something in both of us cracked. There it was again, that pull neither of us could explain away. "I have to," she said. "It's easier." "For who?" She looked down at the papers on my desk, her hand brushing against them just to have something to do. "You don't understand what people would say." "I can't." Her voice faltered. She pressed a hand to her temple. "This was never supposed to mean anything." I took a step closer, not enough to touch, but close enough for the air between us to change. "It does mean something," I said, my tone low. "You just don't want it to." Her breath caught, faint and uneven. "Don't." But I was already there, beside her. Not touching, not yet. Just close enough to see the tremor in her hands. Close enough to feel the heat radiating off her skin. She whispered, "You should leave." "I can't," I said. "Not when you look at me like that." That was when she finally turned, fully, and for the first time, didn't hide what was in her eyes. Fear, yes. But also something softer. Something that had been building all along. A single strand of hair fell across her face. Without thinking, I reached up, slow, careful, and brushed it aside. Her breath hitched, her eyes fluttering shut for just a second. The world outside could have disappeared right then, and neither of us would have noticed. "I shouldn't want this," she murmured, barely audible. "Then tell me you don't," I whispered back. She opened her eyes. The look she gave me was answer enough, trembling, real, caught somewhere between surrender and denial. We were inches apart now, her back against the desk, my hand still hovering near her cheek. Every breath felt like a question waiting to be answered. Then, the sound of a door creaking opened down the hallway. Voices. Footsteps. She froze. I stepped back. But it was too late. The air had already changed, and there was no pretending anymore. The truth doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it just sits in the air, waiting for you to stop pretending you don't see it. The next morning, everything was wrong. Her office door was half closed, the blinds drawn, her tone clipped and professional again. She didn't greet me when I walked in, not even a glance. The distance was deliberate. Calculated. I almost respected it, until I saw the papers on her desk, my handwriting, notes from the report we'd worked on together. But there was something else, a printed email chain, the kind that should have stayed private. "Someone forwarded this," she said before I could ask. Her voice was quiet, even too calm. "Apparently, people think there's something between us." I felt my stomach drop. "Who sent it?" She shook her head. "Does it matter?" "It's not true," I said quickly, then stopped. Because that wasn't entirely true, was it? Not in the way she meant. Her eyes flicked up to mine. "They saw us. That night." The rain. The silence. The distance between us that had felt too small. I hadn't realized someone could have noticed, or cared. "They don't understand," I said. "They don't have to," she replied sharply. "They only have to talk." For a long moment we stood there, her clutching the paper too tightly, me trying to find words that wouldn't make it worse. Finally I said, "You could tell them it's nothing." She laughed once, soft, bitter. "Can you?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because even saying no would have been a lie. She turned away, pressing a hand against the window frame. The light caught her profile, tense, elegant, trembling. "This is my career," she whispered. "Everything I've built. I can't risk that for—" She stopped before finishing the sentence. "For me?" I said quietly. Her silence was the only answer I needed. Something in me broke then, not from anger, but from the helplessness of wanting something you're not allowed to have. I took a step forward, closing the gap she'd been guarding so carefully. "Tell me to stop," I said. Her breath caught. She didn't move. "Tell me to walk away, and I will." But she didn't. Her hand was trembling at her side, and when I brushed past her to reach for the papers, our fingers touched again, a single, accidental connection that felt anything but accidental. She exhaled slowly, eyes glistening, voice barely a whisper. "I can't do this," she said, but her hand didn't move from mine. I could feel her pulse through her fingertips, fast and fragile. "Then why aren't you letting go?" I asked. Her gaze lifted, and for the first time, she didn't hide it, the fear, the want, the exhaustion of pretending. Something in the air shifted. The kind of moment that doesn't ask permission. Outside, the phone on her desk buzzed again, an unwanted reminder of the world waiting to judge us. She pulled her hand away, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Maybe we already crossed the line," she said. "We just didn't notice when." And with that, she walked out, leaving the door half open, the air still heavy with everything neither of us had the courage to undo. Some moments don't ask for permission, they just arrive, demanding to be lived or lost. The days after she walked out were heavy with absence. No messages. No glances. No quiet laughter over shared coffee cups. The silence between us had grown into a wall, solid, impossible. Until tonight. The building was nearly empty, the soft hum of the rain returning as if to echo where we'd left off. I'd stayed late again, though I didn't expect her to. When the elevator chimed and she stepped out, I almost thought I'd imagined her. She paused when she saw me, surprise flickering, then fading into something gentler. "I forgot a file," she said, her voice careful. "Sure," I answered. But neither of us moved. The air between us felt different, thinner, charged. Every breath seemed too loud in the stillness. Finally, she took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. "Maybe I was waiting," I said. Her eyes searched mine, weary but tender. "For what?" "For you to stop pretending." That made her laugh softly, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. "You think this is pretending?" I stood, closing the distance between us until her reflection met mine in the dark window behind her. "I don't know what this is anymore," I said. "I just know it doesn't feel wrong." She looked up at me then, and for the first time, didn't look away. Her hand brushed against my sleeve, light, hesitant, but she didn't pull back. "This will hurt," she whispered. "Someone always gets hurt." "Maybe," I said. "But I can live with that. I can't live with pretending it meant nothing." Her breath trembled. "You're too young to understand what you're risking." "Then teach me," I said, my voice low, the words shaking between us. Her eyes softened, full of conflict, fear, and something deeper, something she'd been fighting since the day we met. I reached out, brushing my fingers against her hair, slow, uncertain, reverent. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch just barely, as though afraid even the air might judge her. When she spoke again, it was a whisper meant only for the space between us. "I tried not to feel this." "I know," I said. "So did I." Our foreheads nearly touched, the air between us alive with every heartbeat we'd been denying. Then, she stepped back. Not far, just enough. Her eyes glistened with something fierce and final. "This can't be about wanting," she said. "If it's real, it has to survive without it." The words hit harder than I expected, not a rejection, but a truth. And yet, even as she turned to go, she stopped halfway, her voice barely audible. "Don't wait for me," she said. But don't forget me either. When the door closed behind her, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding, of everything we'd said without saying, of the love that lived quietly in the spaces between what we could and couldn't do. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it returns in quiet moments, when you least expect it, and exactly when you're ready. It had been months since that night. Seasons had changed, and with them, so had we. I hadn't seen her since she left the office, her resignation coming through in a short, polite email. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just closure written like a business note, professional, distant, final. But finality is a strange thing. Some bonds don't end. They wait. It was a Sunday evening when I saw her again, at a small art exhibit by the old pier. The light from the sea cast everything in gold. She stood near one of the windows, her hair loose, her posture softer than I remembered. For a moment I didn't move. I just watched. Then she turned and smiled. The kind of smile that carried both apology and relief. "You came," she said softly. "I never stopped," I replied. She laughed under her breath, shaking her head. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I mean them," I said simply. The tension between us wasn't sharp anymore. It had melted into something gentler, a kind of peace that comes after a long ache. We walked along the gallery in silence, stopping before a painting of rain on glass, colors blurred, reflections mingling. She said, "You remember the storm?" "I remember everything," I answered. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she turned slightly toward me, her voice quiet. "I thought leaving was the right thing. But the truth is, I missed who I was when you were around." I looked at her then, really looked. The way her eyes softened when she said it. The way her hand brushed against mine, barely touching. This time, I didn't let it go. She didn't pull away either. "I was afraid," she continued, "of what people would think. Of being seen." "And now?" I asked. "Now I just want to stop hiding from what's already true." The world outside the glass shimmered with sunset, the colors deep and warm. She took a slow breath, then leaned in, not for a kiss, but for something quieter. Her forehead rested lightly against mine, her hand finding its way into mine, fingers intertwining without hesitation. No words. Just that stillness, honest, steady, alive. Maybe the world would still whisper. Maybe people would still talk. But standing there, the noise didn't matter anymore. We had both stopped pretending. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were bright, her voice soft. "So what happens now?" I smiled. "We stop running from what already found us." She laughed, that same gentle, unguarded laugh I'd missed for months, and squeezed my hand, grounding me to that moment, that quiet kind of happiness that doesn't need to be proven. The sun dipped lower, the light turning gold to rose. We stood together, close enough to share the same breath, and for the first time, it didn't feel forbidden. It just felt right.